SECfans.com, week 7. You're probably going, why am I not staring at Daniel's smiling face? Instead, I'm just hearing his voice. It's because I am in Bangalore, India for work. So this week you get an audio-only version because I don't have the bandwidth here to push up a bunch of huge video files. But we're going to talk about you anyway because that's how much we love us some college football. Please, A&M fans, South Carolina fans, if you haven't yet already and you keep listening to our show, please subscribe. Whether you subscribe or not, please let us know in the comments what you think about this game in the discussion. Give us your score predictions, your MVP. Argue with one another, but do it kindly. Do it with some grace. All right, y'all. Josh is here with me, going to get nerdy in this game. Josh, South Carolina fans hate you. They hated you in the preseason. They still hate you now because you haven't been high on their team, even though you've been right. I've been higher on South Carolina this year. I picked them to beat Kentucky. I picked them to really play a close one against Georgia. But neither one of us, I think, picked them to finish second in the East. Interestingly enough, though, and I'm going to sort of showcase a little early what's going on, the model has this game a lot closer than maybe people outside of this game would say, especially with A&M coming off of Kentucky win, transitive property, blah, blah, blah. But I will say this. Is it fair to say that people will come into this game maybe overvaluing A&M and undervaluing South Carolina because of that common opponent in Kentucky, without considering the fact that Kentucky did nothing against South Carolina in the second half? And if a couple of things went their way, South Carolina very well could have won that game.
I think it's fair. And it's also fair to say, frankly, Texas A&M did almost nothing about Kentucky the entire game, right? A&M ended up being able to pull back in that game and eke out the win late, but it took overtime because A&M struggled to really ever move the ball, and like you said, with South Carolina, they were successful or good against Kentucky in that was more of a. I think it was more of a game in a lot of ways. I mean, A&M and Kentucky just kind of sat there and stagnated.
Yeah, and Kentucky fans, just South Carolina fans, because you may not know, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to get this point in there because you said it was more of a game. Kentucky fans on our channel, when we did the A&M preview, talked about how they just stomped South Carolina. And if you watched that game and you paid attention to it, they're like, yeah, we shut it down in the second half. No, you didn't. They actually threw more times in the second half than they did in the first half. So I think that game, because at first that score, when you first look at that score at the end of the first half, it looked really bad, but I think the game was a lot closer than they're getting credit for.
No, I agree, and I'm kind of stumbling over myself trying to explain it, but I mean, basically that game is fairly close, and Kentucky scores to go up 17-3, and part of that was off a fumble, and then South Carolina throws an interception. Kentucky scores again following the interception, goes up 24-3. South Carolina misses another field goal, and all of a sudden that game's sort of out of reach. And South Carolina tried to come back in the second half, but if you look at their drive chart, it was touchdown, interception, punt, interception, turnover, and downs. So South Carolina ended up forced into catch-up mode, which they probably shouldn't have been, frankly, because they were only down 2 scores and kept forcing it. Were able to move the ball on Kentucky, but kept throwing interceptions, having negative plays, and threw away a lot of drives. That game was closer than people anticipated. Like you said, we both picked A&M. I picked A&M pretty soundly, and Kentucky fans thought it was ridiculous. But I've been consistent in saying that I think A&M is a lot better than anticipated. I always seem to be high on them. And I think I'm usually justified up until the second half of the season under someone when they honestly just sort of fell apart. I think Fisher's going to avoid that, or at least I'm curious to see if he does. I think A&M has a very, very good shot of finishing as the second best team in the SEC West. And I wasn't even really, I think, critical of South Carolina. I just thought Florida was going to be a lot better than anticipated. And everybody kind of crowed when Florida lost to Kentucky in that game. But now I think maybe South Carolina fans are a little more realistic that you've already lost to Kentucky. You've already lost to Georgia. You're probably not going to finish second in the East. Or if you do, it's going to be a dogfight with Florida in a weird circumstance. So it's all relative. It's an underestimation of the South Carolina-Kentucky game. And I really feel like a lot of what's gone on this year is an over and underestimation of Kentucky. People very much underestimated them early in the year. So they underestimated Florida when they lost to them. And then people got really high because they were 5-0 and they overreacted in thinking that Kentucky was going to beat Texas A&M. And it's really, I think, screwed everybody's perceptions all the way around in this matchup.
So on the flip side of this, if we're putting one in a notch in A&M's belt, obviously it is the Kentucky win. And I'm curious what you think about the fact that, Kentucky did have some success. We actually talked about this in that preview about how they surprisingly scored pretty efficiently against South Carolina's defense, where they had 3 long drives and that was basically it for the whole game. But they did have 3 long drives. What does it say about the fact that A&M holds Kentucky to 7 points? Like, absolutely shuts them out. And the thing that we talked about, that we said if Kentucky wins this game, it's going to be because it's a known fact that A&M has a poor secondary. They have a great run defense, great defensive line, and good linebackers, very poor secondary. And Kentucky just didn't have the ability to take advantage of that. We don't know if Jake Bentley is going to be back or not. He could have played. They say he could have played against Missouri. He didn't. But whether he plays or not, I think we've seen this year that this offense is still maybe a year away. Rico Dowdle is running the ball well, but if they can hold Benny Snell Jr. down, they can probably hold Rico Dowdle down, which means South Carolina is going to have to throw to win, and there's that potential to take advantage of it. But can they? Can they take advantage of a poor secondary, or is it going to be a long day for South Carolina's offense?
And I mentioned that A&M has a solid shot to finish second in the West, and to be completely frank, I'm not even sure that it's true that I think they may even be the quote second best team. The thing with A&M, they hold teams to, and I'm going to touch on model numbers now a little bit. We talk about opponent. The opponent average is allowed. So if your opponent averages 5 yards per carry, you allow 4. You allow 80% of their average. A&M holds teams to 60% of their rushing averages, and they allow 115% of their passing averages. I don't believe, and I'm fairly confident in this, I don't think I've ever seen a defense that was that good against the run and that bad against the pass at the same time. Anything like that where it's so one-sided. And to be clear, we use per play numbers. So it's not that, teams know we can throw the ball so they don't ever run it. We don't look at total yardage. So we don't care the fact that you hardly ever run it. We look at it, how successful are you when you choose to run it. The fact that teams don't run it as much against A&M as they pass by, and it's just a slight margin, should make them more effective against the run, not less. So it clearly is a defense, really more than anything probably, that has a front four that's and linebackers that are big and physical, don't get great pass rush. They get solid pass rush, and then a secondary that's really, really bad. It's pure matchup. And with South Carolina, as you noted, with whether or not Bentley comes back, the question is, can South Carolina generate a passing game? Kentucky could not. Kentucky is almost solely a run team this year. It was a horrible matchup. We talked about that in our preview, that we weren't really sure that Kentucky wasn't a better team than A&M, quote unquote, against your average neutral opponent. But matched up against each other, it was a horrifically hard matchup for Kentucky. Kentucky couldn't run the ball to save their life. I mean, they had 178 yards of offense in that game. They only ran 50 plays in the game. A&M ran 75, which is nuts that A&M had that kind of per play advantage. The problem was A&M still couldn't generate a lot of points because they didn't move the ball that well themselves. I think South Carolina is going to really struggle to run the ball. I think they may struggle to pass it. And before we even get to the model, I think the deciding factor in this game may very well be whether or not Bentley plays and whether or not the passing game's good. Because you either if you pass well, you beat A&M. If you don't pass well, you lose to A&M. And that seems to be the case this year, and it probably will be through the rest of the year.
And South Carolina fans are going to say, wait a minute, we just put 37 points up on Missouri. Well, first of all, Missouri has, if A&M's secondary is bad, Missouri's is historically bad. Because
140%
as of last week,
averages.
Yeah. 140% of opponent averages in passing, and that's the worst we've ever charted. They also, this has been a thing with South Carolina for years now. They got 37 points off of 377 yards. The 2 turnovers, the 2 interceptions they got were huge, but 37 points on three. They were outgained by 120 yards by Missouri, and Missouri's 490 yards and 35 points makes about sense, but 377 and 37 is crazy. I don't think they can expect that against A&M. But what do I know? Why don't we get into the model? Tell me what the model thinks and whether or not we're crazy.
So we already talked on some of these opponent averages. The flip side to it, South Carolina is very average against the run. 91% of opponent rush averages. You should be able to hold, a good defense holds teams to below the rush average a lot more often than it holds pass. So 81% of opponent passing averages, that's really good, actually. South Carolina has a really good pass defense and a average to above average rush defense by FBS standards, or Power 5 standards, I should say. And as we said, A&M is Jekyll and Hyde, run versus the pass. And then you take that, you apply it to what each team's good at offensively. A&M is a more run-heavy team than South Carolina, so that sort of factors into things a little bit. A&M's expected to get 5 yards per play, be able to run it for 3.8 yards per play, but not be able to throw it very well. 6.6 yards per attempt is just the baseline to be competent on a passing offense. Anything below 6.5, and you're usually totally ineffective. That's the mark where it functions, but it's still not good until you get about 7.5 or greater. South Carolina is going to be completely unbalanced according to this, even though their run-pass balance has been almost perfect. 136 runs on the year to 137 passes. They're only going to expected to average 2.7 yards on the ground, but 8.1 yards per attempt. It does have South Carolina outgaining A&M 5.4 yards per play to 5 yards per play. And that also turns into South Carolina being expected to win 23 points to 20. And it in the short version of it, it really comes down to the fact that A&M is a lot more dependent on the pass than maybe people realize. They're not running the ball very well, 4.2 yards per carry, but they're over 8 yards per attempt. South Carolina is a better pass defense. It's supposed to be able to slow that down. South Carolina can also, for the most part, it's being able to pass the ball, and it's not probably could deal a little better with being able to have their run stuffed. 23 points isn't a lot, but it's essentially saying this is going to be a low-scoring game. South Carolina should be able to pass it, and this gets back to my earlier point. I think this game totally depends on whether or not Bentley plays. If Bentley plays and they have more of a passing game, that's that one extra touchdown they're going to need to win. If they don't have Bentley and the passing game falls off, they are not expected to be able to run the ball at all against Texas A&M, and they probably can't score enough to win. I'll give my main score prediction, and I'll say this is my quote official one, and it'll be if Bentley plays. If Bentley plays, I'm actually going to pick South Carolina to win this game if Bentley plays, and I think the model's not too far off. I'm going to say 21-17 South Carolina over Texas A&M. And again, I am darn high on Texas A&M. This is just a brutal matchup because of how the numbers play out, and they're so one-sided. Honestly, South Carolina is probably as good as anybody in the SEC West at passing the ball. It's just Auburn and LSU are way more run dependent. So I'm going to go 21-17 South Carolina, even though it kills me. But if Bentley doesn't play, or honestly, if Bentley's banged up, I think A&M wins it. I think they're going to win. They'd win something like 21-10. So that's my other prediction. And you know what? I'm even going to flip it. I think the odds are, even if Bentley plays, he's going to be not at 100%. So I'm going to flip it and say my official prediction is probably A&M 21-10. But if Bentley were to play and be healthy, I think South Carolina could win this game.
All right. So I'm torn because I want to say that Bentley coming back would bring them a huge shot in the arm, and backups are backups for a reason, and he's better than the backup. But even if he plays, even if he's healthy, I haven't seen enough from him to let me know that he can consistently do well against this defense and take advantage of the things that they struggle with. And I don't think Rico Dowdle's going to have a great day because, I mean, he didn't have a great day against Missouri. And we've also, we've said that Mizzou has a better run defense this year than they've had in the past. They showed it against Georgia. And I do think the win against Missouri is actually a big step for the South Carolina team. But I'm making my pick regardless of who plays quarterback. I think A&M 26, South Carolina 17. And I think this is another tough game for A&M. They've played a lot of good teams this year. I think they're the second best team in the West right now. Even with their struggles recently with offense, I think 26-17 Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean it jives with what I'm feeling. I still feel like I'm really high on A&M, but I'm give pause because they struggled so much with Arkansas. They struggled so much offensively, honestly, against Kentucky. I feel like their offense can really be slowed down or stopped if you can stop the run. But more importantly, if you're good against the pass, I think they're really dependent on moving the ball in chunk plays in the passing game. And I also think they took a big step back when they lost Osborne as a receiver. I don't think they've been able to replace him really whatsoever as a big play jump ball guy. So I think both of those are probably it's probably realistic.
All right. Anything else on this game?
No, no, I don't. It'll obviously it's an important game for both teams, and this out of conference matchup is going to have a big effect on where they both stand in the out of division matchup, excuse me, versus how they're going to stand in the division pecking order.
All right, y'all. That's kind of it for us. I will say one more thing. I think Williams, running back for A&M, is going to be the MVP. He showed last week that he can actually be an effective weapon catching the ball. And Crockett had a huge day last week. Drew Lock didn't even throw that well against South Carolina, but Crockett ran all over him. I think Williams is going to have a big day running the ball and catching the ball. But you know what? South Carolina fans have been on us all year, and they would love nothing more than to come back and tell us, I told you so. So, hey, if we're wrong, come back and tell us you told us so, but that means you got to comment now and tell us what you think the score's going to be. All right, y'all, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. If you haven't subscribed and don't want to subscribe, just go ahead and tell us what you think the score's going to be. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.